Are we on? Okay, so let's start. So okay, so so I'm going to show they're going to control the overheads back there, but I'm seeing it on here, so I can read it easily rather than straining to see it back there. So anyway, I'm going to speak on incredible creatures, God's incredible creatures, and ask the question: were they designed or did they evolve? How do you explain how they came to be? Because some creatures have very special attributes, which you could ask, how could that possibly happen? So let me just go into it. I showed this picture on slide 2 last time. So everything that we see, every concept that we see, can be explained by one of 3 ways. Either it happened by chance, or it happened because there's a law of nature which requires it to happen that way, or if it wasn't either by chance or by law, it's by design. If you look at the rocks, the faces on the rock there, you'll see, ask the question, how'd they come to be? Is that because the rain fell on the rock in certain angles and it just cut out those faces? Was there a law of nature to make that happen? No, clearly it was designed. Some craftsman designed it and then built it. And so we ask the question, same for all living organisms. So incredible creatures, slide number 3. What does the Bible say about creation of creatures? And clearly in the very first chapter of Genesis, God created everything according to their kind, and they reproduced after their kind. He uses the word kind 10 times. I think he means that. And what do we find in the fossil record? We'll look at that. Let's look at some of the creatures, some very special creatures that especially the kids will really appreciate, and then ask the question, how do they come to be? Do creatures appear to be designed or not? And then by whom? Is evolution really true? And ask the question, is God the designer, creator of these incredible creatures? Again, so slide number 4, creation of distinct kinds. Clearly in chapter 1, God created everything, the grass, the herbs, the fruit trees, animal kingdom, different animals, and then finally mankind. They're all created according to their kind and reproduced according to their kind. So each kind cannot transform itself into another. You don't have to be afraid that your cat's going to turn into a dog, for example. They'll reproduce after their kind. So there are definite, distinct categories of living organization. There's variations within kinds. I mean, you have dogs, which you have different kinds of dogs, or different types of dogs, not kinds, different types of dogs and cats. And these kinds are still recognized today. Spend a minute looking at the fossil record. You may have heard the Cambrian explosion. Anybody heard that term before? That means that all the phyla, there's layers of rock. And the early life was at the bottom layers, and they according to Darwin, this should never happen, but all the phyla appear at the bottom layers. So, and then we have living fossils. We have polystrate fossils. I'll show pictures of that. And then we have lack of empirical evidence of transitions. The Archaeopteryx was said to be a transition from a reptile to a bird, but that's a totally different kind. And there's no evidence for that. The whale evolution has been debunked, horse evolution has been debunked, and then in some cases they're inverted fossil orders. Fossils are in different layers than they're expected to be. And if you study the history of a possible transition from an ape-like creature to man, is there any evidence for that? No. People have claimed to have evidence, but they've all failed for various reasons. Okay, and then the Cambrian explosion, you'll see at the bottom here the Cambrian, Precambrian layers. And then the Cambrian layers contains the fossils of most phyla known to man today. And the only soft-bodied organisms like worms appear in the Precambrian at the bottom layer, just moving that along there. And then number 3, the number of species fossilized in higher layer decreases in each higher layer. Okay, then what do we mean by living fossils? Well, you see the picture on top there. This is a fossil of a coelacanth fish that was thought to be extinct. And then all of a sudden in 1938, somebody caught a fish, in, I think it's south of South Africa, and they found this, the second picture there. The evolutionists thought it was extinct 70 million years ago, but then somebody caught a live fish, and guess what? The skeleton looks exactly like the fossil. So, it really wasn't extinct, and it didn't go extinct that long ago. And even termites, there are termites, fossils of termites which are found there look exactly like termites we have today. Then there's the issue of polystrate fossils. What do I mean by that? Well, that means that you see layers of rock on the left here. So layers of rock, and you see the remains of a tree, going through all those layers. Well, layers can take millions of years, supposedly, by evolution to acquire. So how could you have a tree survive that long, and and the layers go and cover that? That's called a polystrate. That means multiple straits fossils. And in Mount St. Helens, we had an example of that. So we see that the trees in the water in the lake by Mount St. Helens, they go through multiple layers. I mean, when the ash blew off the top of the mountain and it covered these trees, you'll see the ash covered multiple layers. And so that would explain the polystrate fossil on the left as well. Okay, so that's why a tour of Mount St. Helens is so important for you to understand how these things can happen very quickly. They don't need millions of years to happen. Quote from an evolutionist, contrary to what most scientists write, the fossil record does not support the Darwinian theory of evolution, because it is this theory, there are several, which we use to interpret the fossil record. By doing so, we are guilty of circular reasoning if we then say the fossil record supports this theory. Circular reasoning means, you use A to prove B, and then you use B to prove A. Circular reasoning. So it just doesn't fit. So a number of people from ICR, Institute of Creation Research, there's a Dr. Dwayne Gish, and he has since passed on, but he's written a number of books called we just show show the quote there, and then at the bottom of that one more, you see, he wrote a book called "The Fossils Still Say No." They don't show evolution. So he says there in the book, failure to find transitional forms where evolutionary theory predicts such forms should have been found, and we don't find that. And remember Darwin, when he wrote his book in 1859, The Origin of Species, he could not find any of these transitional forms either. He admitted that he didn't have the fossils supporting his theory, but he figured over time people would find more fossils that would prove his theory, but it hasn't happened. Okay, then we get into the topic of the special creatures, and this is where the kids will chime in. And you've seen some of these names of different creatures, and you have to ask the question, how do they come to be? If evolution was working, then couldn't how would what we see have evolved from something before it? And do we have any evidence of something before it? So I'm going to look at these creatures here, and all of them have some very special features. How many have heard of the cheetah? What's the fastest animal running in the world? How fast do you think it could run? How many miles per hour?
95.
Pardon?
95.
70. Yeah, 70. And you can see that in the form there. He can run up to 70 miles per hour, over 700 yards. Don't try to run a race against him. He can out-race you anytime. So it can reach up to 45 miles per hour just in 2 seconds. That's a very fast animal. And there's nothing anywhere close to that. Then they come to the giraffe. Now, the giraffe, as you know, has a very long neck, so he can reach the leaves on the trees. That neck can be 8 to 10 feet long. Now, we have a very short neck. So where did the giraffe get its long neck from? Is there any other animal that looks like that it could have evolved from? I don't know of any. But how can he do this? How can the giraffe do this? 10 feet high at the shoulder, and then it's 8 foot long neck, and he has neck bones in the neck there, and a huge heart to deliver blood to the brain. So he's got his heart down here. He's got to deliver up 10 feet to get to his head. What happens if you move your head quickly? And do you get dizzy sometimes? You can. Well, imagine this giraffe. He's up reaching the leaves on the tree, and then he wants to bend down and get some water. How does he do that? He has very large lungs, slow air intake on those lungs, and then when he reaches down to get water, just imagine, he's got to move his neck by 20 feet. You think he'd get dizzy? Yeah, but he's built to handle that. He's got reinforced arterial walls, a bypass and anti-pooling valves, a web of small blood vessels, and pressure sensing signals. So they can use this pressure sensing signals to stop the fast flow of blood to their head, as else they would just go unconscious if that didn't stop. So it's engineered for survival, defies explanation by evolution. You know any other animal close to that it could have evolved from? No, it's a very special animal. And then you have the 8-armed octopus. You've heard of octopus. Ever heard of the 8-armed? Oh, you have, okay. So 8-armed octopus, ink shooting, and they jet propel and can swim very fast. It shoots ink to create smoke screen and dull a predator. In other words, if a predator is coming towards it, it can shoot this smoke screen out and stop the predator from getting close to him. And if he were to lose an arm, it could regrow if they lose an arm. If you lose an arm, I don't think you could do that. There's no other animal that is anywhere close to those features. And here you have a special seal, the Weddell seal. It can remain underwater for 45 minutes. How long can you hold your breath underwater? Maybe 1 minute at most. And then it can dive up to 1,500 feet deep. Think, if you try to dive like 30, 40 feet, you'd have real pressure on your head. This guy does it 1,500 feet. And of course, he can hold his breath for 45 minutes. Is there any other animal that is close to that you know of? I don't think so. This is a very special crated animal. Here's some, if you go fishing, you'll like this, the archer fish. The archer fish can shoot water 15 feet into the air and hit a bug. Whoa, that's pretty good. Can you do that? No. So he can put his mouth at the surface, but he has his eyes underneath. So his eyes have to be special so it can see through the water layer and see his target up there. And so very powerful one. Here's another kind of fish, a decoy fish, lives in the waters near Oahu, Hawaii. He uses a dorsal fin as a lure, this here, and he goes up and appears to be a separate, smaller fish, complete with mouth and eye, and it ceases its gill movement, so it just lays still and stops breathing, and then the lure turns deep red color, that lure on his gill there. And then the part attaching the lure to the fish body becomes transparent, so you don't see the attachment to the fish body. And then moves the decoy side to side, remaining still. And then when the prey gets close, he opens his mouth and closes it, because the prey didn't see that at all. He just saw the lure that attracted him. So the fish snaps up the victim when within reach. And here's another angler fish, uses a lure at the end of a movable fishing pole suspended over the mouth. And he has a fishing rod coming out of his back with luminescent bulb at the end of it. The deep sea angler has a light bulb hanging from the roof of his mouth, just dangling, and it simulates the movement of real shrimp and may move in quick backward darting motion. If the bait gets nipped off, he grows back to the bait within a few days, but it's fully replaced within a few weeks. So his bait, he has a way of attracting these fish as a lure. Now here's a very special cicada insect. Anybody heard of that special insect? Yeah. So it's very popular, I think, in Illinois and some other states up there. So what's special about it? Well, it's it feeds off of trees. You'll see different copies of it there, and then it can hibernate for the longest period of time. There are about 2,500 species in the world that exist. One can live underground for 13 to 17 years. Can you hibernate that long? Do you know any other animal that can hibernate that long? Nothing. So again, a very special designed argument. It does not bite or sting and is not a pest, but it makes a real racket, because when they wake up from their hibernation, they make a whole bunch of noise. And people that live up there complain about that, because it really is very disturbing. And then we have the sea slug. It lives along the seacoast within tidal zone, where the moon moves the tide up and down. It feeds primarily on sea anemones, and the anemones are equipped with thousands of small stinging cells on their tentacles. So the cells explode at the slightest touch, plunge poisoned harpoons into would-be intruders, so they keep their intruders at bay, and the speared intruder is paralyzed and drawn into the anemone's stomach to be digested. So that's how the sea slug lives, by this mechanism. So again, a very special kind of slug. So the sea slug itself is not stung. There are undigested stinging cells that are swept along through the ciliated tubes that are connected to the stomach and end in pouches. Stinging cells are arranged and stored in the pouches to be used for sea slug defense. And whenever attacked, sea slug defends itself using the stinging cells. So this defies any evolutionary explanation, because there is no sea slug that is anywhere like this at all. So it's a very special creation. Gardening ants. Anybody ever seen hills of ants? Yeah, and they're always building something. Well, this is a special kind of ant, the bold-horn acacia tree of South America, furnished with large hollow thorns. And it's inhabited by ferocious, stinging ants. Small bumps on the tree supply food to the ants. Tree receives complete protection from all animal predators and plant competitors. So he's really hidden. Ants, but these ants will viciously attack all intruders. Ants are gardeners and nip off any green shoot that shows its head near their tree. So again, a special function there that they have. When all the ants are removed from one of the trees, the tree dies within 2 to 15 months. So the tree depends on those ants being there. And now you have another action between two different kind of fish. And this is called symbiosis. In other words, each fish depends on the other one. So they're dependent on each other to live. They couldn't live without their counterpart. So, and one of them does the cleaning. So certain fish feed on smaller fish and shrimp. You see this big guy on the right there. And their mouths become littered with debris and parasites. So how do they clean their mouths? The larger fish pays a visit to the cleaning station and opens its mouth and gill chambers. And the little cleaner fish and shrimp swim into his mouth and do their job and back out, of course. So why would the big fish allow them to do that? There's some arrangement between the two. The big fish does not eat it. It just uses the small fish to clean it, and the little fish uses it the big fish as a source for food. So they depend on each other. So it's a win-win for both parties. And it's also practiced by Egyptian plover birds in cleaning out parasites from the Nile River crocodile. So this is not the only animal, the only fish that does that, but there's no connection between the fish and the crocodile, of course. They're totally separate kind of animals. So this is the only fish here that does that. Then we have a water beetle. Okay. It defends itself against enemies by secreting a detergent substance from a gland. So if a predator comes close to him, they would shoot out this detergent to keep the predator away. And that propels the beetle forward quickly out of immediate danger from the predator. These detergents cause the surface tension of water to break down. So the surface tension is broken down, and then the predator that was on the surface there would be really confused. So the pursuing insect sinks into the water because that surface tension is broken. And then we have about the butterfly. It doesn't start out as a butterfly. It starts out as a kind of a worm, and then turns into a chrysalix here, and then that in turn turns into a butterfly. About that transformation. That's how could that happen? These are three totally different living organisms, and yet one transforms into another. And so there's a lot of butterflies that do that metamorphosis process. So they're very, very unique. How would evolution possibly explain that? There's no way to explain that. And now we come to some very special birds that can migrate from one place to another. And you wonder, how do they know where to go and what makes it possible to do? So we're going to look at two different examples. The white-throated warbler spends its summer in Germany and the winters in Africa. So the parent birds take off for Africa at the end of summer as the young birds become more independent. And then a few weeks later, the young birds take off flying instinctively across thousands of miles of unfamiliar land and sea to rejoin their parents. How do they know how to do that? If your parents moved on you to a different continent, how would you find your parent, But it's built, it's instinctively built into these birds to be able to do that. They know where their parents, there's magnetic fields that they use to do that. So they know where their parents went. So the brains of the birds have inherited knowledge. Where did that come from? How did that possibly happen? They can tell the latitude, longitude, and direction by the stars. and they have a calendar, clock, and navigational data in their head, so they know where to go. So that's all designed and built in. It's hard to imagine. We as humans, if our parents left us behind and didn't leave a trail, how would we ever, find them? And then here's another special one: the Alaskan golden plover, born in Alaska, and they're incubated for 26 days. And after a few months, the parents fly to Hawaii, which is thousands of miles away, 4,500 kilometers to be precise. So they have to be able to fly 4,500 kilometers from Alaska to Hawaii to meet up with their parents again. And again, they don't have any, their parent didn't tell them how to do it. They're built-in knowledge. The average weight of each bird is about 140 grams. And but as they get ready to fly, they put on 70 more grams of weight as fuel, because when you fly, you're using up the food in your body, and you're losing weight as you go. So how do they make it that far, and why do they eat more so they're heavier? So it takes, the next slide, takes 88 hours to fly to Hawaii at a rate of 51 kilometers per hour. So that's 51 times 88 is the distance in kilometers to get to Hawaii. And so how do they have enough energy to do that? So it's all over open water, so you can't take a rest and rest on a rock or an island. It's all without a break. And it takes 250,000 wing flaps to get that distance. Fly through, doesn't matter the weather, fly through fog, rain, sunshine, starlight, overcast skies, and it requires 0.6% of body weight per hour. That's how much they expend. Now, if they just flew straight on their own, all their fuel would be exhausted in 72 hours, but it takes 88 hours to get there. So how do they do that? They fly in a V formation. You see ducks flying in a V formation and other birds flying in a V formation. They have to change, who the leader is periodically to save energy. So how do they know how to do that? That's built into them. And other migratory feats here, the migration of the golden plover here. It's a Canadian golden plover bird. It travels 8,000 miles south from Hudson Bay, in Canada there. You can see the bay just to the right of the blue there. And all the way, just follow the blue line, goes down to South Africa, crosses 2,000 miles of sea from Nova Scotia to the Caribbean. So it's got a little bit of a break there. And then it winters in Argentina, the red place down there, returns by way of the Central American and Mississippi Valley, goes back a different route. Okay, so how do they know all this? It's built into them. Then you have a barn swallow. It migrates 9,000 miles from northern Canada to Argentina. And so that's further yet, and that's all over water there. The Arctic tern migrates 14,000 miles from pole to pole, from North Pole to South Pole and back. And that's a huge distance. And that, of course, they may have some stops there, but then there's others that also can migrate, other kinds of animals that have some migration capability. In other words, like the whales, they know where they need to be. Different kinds of whales will be in different parts of the ocean, and the bats and the salmon. So it's all programmed into them. So that's a lot of different kinds of animals. So what does that tell us? How would the evolutionists explain that? The remarkable migratory abilities that they can't evolve piecemeal. They can't, let me try flying to Hawaii and see if I get there. Because if I don't get there, they can't reproduce, right? They can't evolve to the better birds until they can learn how to do that. So there is no evolution involved in that. It's designed into them. So it requires a directing intelligence. Somebody programmed them to be able to do that. Migratory instincts are useless unless they're perfect, because if they're less than perfect, they wouldn't make it. So navigating perfectly across only half of an ocean doesn't help. You've got to get across the whole ocean. So these animals are carefully created and designed with these instincts built into them. And then we come to the human cell. The human cell is a very complicated entity. And there's no, you can look at all the parts. There's a nucleus there. There's a mitochondrium. Let's see, a vesicle there, the red plasma. And there's a membrane, the green membrane, that covers the whole cell up. Because if the cell were not covered by that membrane, it couldn't survive. The elements would kill it. So first of all, where did this cell come from? Did it happen by chance? You have to get a whole bunch of things together and make them if it's by chance. Because all these things are not going to be in one place that you can just accidentally build a cell. So this has to be designed. The information required to build that is so astronomical that it can't possibly happen by chance. Somebody designed that. And our human bodies contain 75 trillion cells like this. They're all complex, and which I shared the other day. All life starts out with one cell. And at the beginning of life, talking about humans in the woman's womb, they start to reproduce, duplicate. One becomes 2, and they're identical. 2 becomes 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, and so on. And they're all identical. And then all of a sudden they start to differentiate. So how do these cells know when to start to differentiate? We have 200 different kinds of cells in our body: hair cells, eye cells, skin cells, bone cells. 200 different kinds of cells. So there's got to be a program in there to say, when do these cells start to differentiate? And it has to be in the right order, else you wouldn't have a baby. It's that complex. So there has to be a program in there. And we have other talks on what's involved in that. I mean, there's DNA. The data, the program is written in DNA, and the DNA is programmed to do this for every special animal. It's different. But these cells are very, very complex, can't form by chance. Then the other thing, if you examine the cell compared to other things that we know about, the cell is, you look under the light microscope there, just directly below, you see the cell, and on the far left, the relative sizes of each of these, you're talking in meters at the very far left, and you're talking in nanometers as you move to the far right. And so the electron orbit at the bottom right is very small. The atom is very small. And then you have a molecule, you have DNA, you have a virus, bacteria, a cell as you move further left, and a hair cell, and an ant, size of an ant, a wasp, an apple, and then a human. So they're all different sizes. And of course, with today's microscope, you can see almost all of this. When Darwin came up with his theory of evolution, he couldn't see this. So he just thought it was blobs that were reproducing. But what's a blob? He had no idea what that was. So now, I would surmise if Darwin knew this, he would not have come up with his theory. It's because it's impossible. Okay, and then you have your eye. Some evolutionists say, well, our eyes evolved from just some flat surface that could detect light, and then as it needed more complexity, it just evolved into that. But that does not explain the human eye. And you'll see there the very many parts of that. It has staggering complexity. It can't be explained by step random mutation and selection. So the only way you can explain it, it was designed with a purpose to see. And when you see what your eye does, it's hard to believe. It does automatic aiming and focusing. I mean, if the light will change what you see, you can focus, you can adjust the aperture that it sees, and it functions from almost complete darkness to bright sunlight. We can see, if we're in the dark, and eventually we can start to see some things. Our eyes adjust to that. And how does it do that? We can see a fine hair. Our eyes make 100,000 separate motions per day. So you're blinking, open, close, and separate motions, 100,000 of them per day. I hope they're well oiled. So it provides us with a continuous series of color stereoscopic pictures, and all performed without complaint. I mean, our eyes, as we get older, of course, we get cataracts and things like this, but we can see pretty well. I can see pretty well at my age as well. And so that has survived for a long period of time. And people do have complication with their eyes. We wear glasses so we can see better, but all in all, our eyes are very functional for a long time. So it carries out its own maintenance. While we sleep, we close our eyes. And so that's our rest period for our eyes, and we need that every day too. So next slide, how does evolution explain what we've just looked at? All of these things. So these are features of God's incredible creatures. How do you explain beauty? How do you explain visual beauty? Where does that come from? We see fish deep in the sea have visual beauty. Why? We're not down there to see it, but it has visual beauty. And who designed that? Mimicry. How did it develop? One type of organism imitates or mimics another type. We saw that in some of the creatures we looked at here. Not every creature can do that, of course, very, very few. But there are spiders and ants and anglerfish which can mimic what they see. And then convergence, solar systems in bats and porpoises. I mean, they depend on a magnetic field for them to get where they're going. And then the migration of the birds and the bats and flying reptiles and birds, they have wing mechanisms which get them from one place to another, and their wings are different depending on what kind of living organism that is. So there is no evolutionary mechanism that can explain how this all happens. It has to be designed into that organism. So what did we learn here today? Well, looking at these creatures, does anybody see any evidence that these creatures that we looked at, what could they have evolved from? Look at the giraffe, look at the cheetah, look at the fish that have special features. There's no other living organism that is anywhere like what they are. They're very special. Do creatures appear to be designed? Is there any other way to explain that? Randomly? Could that have happened? I don't think so. And so they seem to be designed. Then if they were designed, who designed them? But the designer, we believe, is God, as explained in his word. So God is the designer, creator of these incredible creatures. Is evolution really true, as some of you have taught in your public schools? I don't think so. Evolution is totally different from creation. So God's creatures are designed. Creation requires a creator, and God is that creator. Creatures are designed. They cannot be explained by evolution, are designed for a purpose, and God created these creatures for our enjoyment. And we are created by God in His image to worship Him and to enjoy His fellowship. So with that, that's it for now. This you see, the next slide. Number 40. Right there. So anyways, I just wanted to again remind you that these messages are being recorded here, and they will be up on my website, and your pastor will, I'm sure, send a link to all that. But the other stuff on my website, I've got a lot of messages on creation versus evolution and apologetics, but I've also got a complete course on creation, and it really addresses creation versus evolution. And right now, I'm actually giving that course. I've been overseas and given that course at Bible schools, but now, after COVID, I'm doing that via Zoom. So I'm actually doing that in the country of Pakistan, where a pastor there discovered my website and the course and asked, "Can you do it here?" Well, I can do it here, but over Zoom. So we're not flying there, we're doing it over Zoom. So every week now we've got a group of over 40 different pastors and evangelists that are taking that course and are be able to share that with others because they have no other way of getting that information there. And then the other one is a complete course on apologetics. And then all of my messages and sermons are on the messages site. So it's all there. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, okay, that's the end of it. So anyway, if we have a few minutes, if people have questions, or you understand it all. It makes sense. So I'm sure the pastor will bring a microphone around if people have questions, and of course we'll be available here for a while too if you have questions afterwards. And I know we covered a lot of material.
To the kids. He's a kid.
So, do you think after the fall, Adam and Eve sinned?
Speak into the mic.
Yeah. Do you think there's God put on more insects after the fall?
After the fall, he didn't hear the.
Yeah, after the fall. Do you think God added more insects, mosquitoes and termites, cockroaches?
Yeah. I don't know, but I don't think he had to. I mean, some of these had features that could, independent of the fall. The symbiosis, the mimicry, and all that, they could be created with those capabilities. Yeah. So I don't, we don't have no documentation on that in the Bible, and so it would be conjecture to say yes or no. Yeah.
He asked the question because his pastor makes those conjectures all the time.
Yeah. So do people listen to your conjectures?
They don't have a choice.
But anyway, any question is
in one of my actually ICR classes, they also talked about that evolution cannot explain, it's not very consistent. Evolution couldn't explain how like the octopus has a really highly developed eye, but he's a kind of prehistoric creature. Like he didn't really develop in any other way, but just has this really crazy good eye, and so there's also all these like things where like creation doesn't show a continuum of advancement. Like there's some creatures are still stuck being simple and unadvanced and unevolved, and then there's, and so I heard that that's another reason why they can't really explain things, because
Yeah,
there's all these creatures that,
right.
haven't evolved at all in
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Darwin himself said, there's no way I can explain how the eye could have evolved. I mean, that breaks my head to think about how that could have evolved. And you can't. In fact, there's a trilobite, which is a living organism, or is now extinct. And they have discovered that it has even a much more complex eye than we have, multiple layers. So how could that be? And it is extinct now. So
What's
that,
the purpose when you think about that?
what?
What's the purpose of that? Oh, so what is the purpose to that? If you have one eye that is stronger, for what purpose was it created? I know God he's a creator and he likes to create.
Yeah.
So we don't know the depth of it on why some things are just like the color of the fish underneath. We don't really see. It's great when you go to Hawaii and you can see them, but
And-
knowing that they're under and you don't get to see them all the time.
Yeah. Well, and some living organisms have gone extinct,
Yes.
right? And why?
And what was the purpose for that? Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't know God's mind.
You can ask that question when you get up there.
Yes.
Yeah. I can't answer all those questions.
Well, Bronwyn keeps like doing this while she's like crocheting or something, so I think she has a question.
But that's okay. If they don't have more questions, we can. I'll be available for a while if you want to ask other questions as well. So thank you for your time, and I hope it was instructional and useful. Thank you.